Welcome. Let me set the stage. This is the 1983 strategic surprise scenario. And so we're looking at NATO's nightmare at a time when it really was still quite a nightmare. The game begins with a game turn 0. So this is the pre-war peacetime rush to the border. So the Soviets get one turn to move to the border, and they get to use march movement, which is double their printed movement allowance. So they're all in column formations, rolling down the roads, heading towards the border. And the presumption here is that on the final day before the Soviets come over the border, NATO gives the word to mobilize, and its armies scramble to get up to their general deployment positions. The mechanic in this game is that the Soviets get their full movement allowance and march movement to boot, that doubling of their movement allowance. NATO has to roll for each national army. So I have completed game turn 0, and the Soviets have rolled up to the border. They have bypassed Berlin. They are leaving the Grundeschutz regiments to cover the Berlin garrison, and everybody has gone up forward. NATO got off the ball pretty well in this one. So the West Germans rolled a 5, which allowed them to move 5 of their 6 movement points. The US rolled a 6, which allowed them to move all 5 of their 5 movement points. The British only rolled a 3. The Dutch rolled a 3, and the Belgians rolled a 3. So the minor allies didn't move very far, but the two main forces in NATO's army did. So what we're looking at here is NATO's first turn move. The French do not get to move on this turn at all, nor do the Danes or any of the Dutch and Belgians in the Netherlands or Belgium itself. As NATO has run towards the border, I have not stacked, and the reason I have not stacked is that each airstrike affects 2 steps in the target hex. You can stack as many as 4 steps in a hex. So you can apply 1 airstrike into a hex, and you can affect 2 brigades or a Soviet division, each 2 steps, or you could throw 2 air points into a hex, and you will affect 2 Soviet divisions or 4, up to 4 NATO brigades. But each of those airstrikes goes in separately, and so I'm not giving the Soviets the chance to get 2 brigades with 1 airstrike. I'm not giving them the unit density that makes that easy. Now, that does mean that I'm sacrificing my front line because not in strong stacks. But for the first turn, I just have to take it on the chin. So I have minimized my exposure to air, and as a result, I'm going to lose more units to the Soviets' ground attack. Okay, it's still downloading at date 1 of 1. Okay, so Denmark. We have the Danes. They did not get to move, so the initial units are set up. The West Germans have moved up to the border, as have the British and the Americans, the Dutch and the Belgians. But you will see that I am not stacking. I'm keeping that low unit density. I'm going to accept that I'm going to take some losses. So we begin with game turn 1. Let's refresh. So game turn 1, refugees are in effect, which means that NATO cannot use march movement, which doubles the movement allowance of NATO units that are not within contested airspace. So let's talk just briefly about that concept of airspace. Rail movement and march movement and ferry movement all take place in friendly airspace. Tactical movement, which is just moving with your printed movement allowance, takes place in contested and enemy airspace. Your probability of being intercepted when you move by sea or by air increases between friendly airspace, contested airspace, and enemy airspace. So with that background, let's define what those mean. Friendly airspace is airspace anywhere that is within 5 hexes of a friendly supplied city or unit and not within 5 hexes of an enemy supplied unit or city. So right now, friendly airspace basically exists in all of West Germany that is not within 5 hexes of the border, where the Soviets are all lined up. Contested airspace is within 5 hexes of a friendly supplied unit or city and an enemy supplied unit or city. So it's a 10 hex band on either side of the front line, 5 hexes in each direction. And then Soviet friendly airspace will be 5 hexes behind the front line as well. As the front line moves, so does the airspace. The Soviets can use March movement, which would double their printed movement allowance, anywhere until they hit that 5 hex band behind their own front lines. You cannot combine March movement and regular movement, so you are required to stop when you hit that contested band if you're using March movement. Right, so with that little digression, we begin with game turn 1. So the first thing that we're going to do is the joint status phase, but there's absolutely nothing to do. We now have the Warsaw Pact headquarters supply phase, but all the headquarters are in friendly territory, so we don't worry about that. We have the movement supply segment, but all Soviet units are in their own territory, so they're in supply. And so we would move to rail movement, but there is no rail movement. There are Soviet reinforcements arriving by rail in this point. It is worth probably doing a brief digression on supply. The supply rules are fairly long. The concept is absurdly simple. If you're in a home country, and every Warsaw Pact country is home to every other Warsaw Pact unit, because they all share a common logistical system, one of their big advantages. The West Germans are only in their home country in West Germany, the French in France, etc. So if you're in your home country, you're in combat supply and movement supply if you're within 10 hexes of a friendly supplied city. That's it. It's as simple as that. If you're in a friendly country, you're in movement supply if you're within 10 hexes of a friendly supplied city. You're in combat supply only if you're within range of a friendly or headquarters. So you've got to trace your combat supply to those headquarter units when you're in a friendly country that is not your home country. And then if you're in an enemy country, which the Soviets will be very shortly, then both combat and movement supply have to be traced to your headquarters. And then they trace back. The supply chain goes back to any city that can trace supply to any other one city, but it does it in 10 hex segments. And this gets around one of my pet peeves, which is supply rules that allow me to find a hole in the other guy's line, loop through 500 miles of enemy territory, and come out to connect to a supply source through another gap in the line far further north. That can't happen in this game because of those 10 hex legs between friendly supplied cities. So there would be no chain of cities that would ever allow you to, say, find a gap near Würzburg and then find another gap up near Hamburg and connect to Schwerin for supply. All right, so supply is really a very simple concept. So we begin now with air and sea movement. And the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to attempt to take Copenhagen. So I'm going to come down to the strategic reserve box. I'm going to grab my Marines. I'm going to grab one of my Soviet airborne divisions. I'm going to grab the air transport commands and the amphibious commands to move all of this. And we're going to go trucking on up to Denmark. All right, so this is a fairly practiced move. So I'm going to drop my airborne division south of Copenhagen. I'm going to drop my Marines north of Copenhagen. So in they go. Drop. The amphibious commands bring in the Marines, and the airborne are flown in by my air transport command. So now we are going to have to look at interception. One thing that I failed to do is that we do need to roll on the air campaign table at the beginning of the show. So I'm going to roll my die. And the result is a 4. So we look at the air campaign table for the strategic surprise scenario. Because this is 83, we're going to use the table straight. If it were 88, we would be adding 1 to this die roll. So with the die roll of 4, we can record that the Pact is going to come in with 6 tactical air points and 2 operational air points. And NATO is going to be lucky and come in with 3 tactical air points. So this was a fairly good roll for NATO, and it says that our Air Force was up and in action doing its thing. So not quite as surprised as our ground forces. All right, so now with this paradrop and amphibious assault, we go to the Warsaw Pact interception table, and we look at game turn 1 as a row, and we look at Warsaw Pact transporting enemy airspace, because we are way more than 5 hexes away from a friendly supplied city here. We're dropping into Danish airspace, and we see that in the intersection of Warsaw Pact transport and enemy airspace, in game turn 1 of supplies, the value is a 4. So I have to roll 2 dice. And I need to roll higher than a 4 or I will lose the step. So first I roll for the Polish 7th Brigade. All right, 2 dice. The Polish 7th Brigade bites the dust, and with it, an amphibious transport is sunk. So now we roll again for the 336th Soviet Naval Brigade, and they get through. So they're there. Now we roll for the Baltic Corps headquarters, and it makes it through barely. All right, so these 2 units are destroyed. These make it. All right, now we roll for the airborne units. Now, here we're in an enemy zone of control, meaning we're within SAM range of the air defense systems that those brigades field. So we have to add 1 to our interception value or subtract 1 from our die roll. I will subtract 1 from my die roll. So 2 rolls for the 1st regiment, a 6 that goes down to a 5, just higher than a 4, 1st makes it. 2nd regiment just makes it. 3rd regiment, aha, that's a 5, down to a 4, 3rd regiment fails to get through, and with it, the command is lost. All right, so we move these units back to the recovery box. They're done for the turn. All right, so that didn't work out so very well for us. We are going to possibly lose Denmark as a result of this. But such is life. This game turn 1, we get our first 2 supply points. And we also get a chemical munitions point. Now, as the Soviet, I'm going to fly in my 2 airmobile brigades out of the strategic reserve box. And I'm using air ferry here, meaning I have to go into friendly airspace. There is no chance of my being intercepted in friendly airspace game turn 1 of the surprise scenario. So the only question is, where do I put this? And so the 37th is a Baltic. I'm going to fly that into Stettin. And then I'm going to fly the 38th into Praha. That now gives every front an airborne brigade backup. All right, so that is the completion of the air and sea movement, unless I want to do something with my remaining parachute division. I can leave it in the strategic reserve box, or I can bring it on the map. I choose to bring it on the map, and I'm going to fly it into Leipzig. As long as it's in a friendly city, it can conduct another drop operation. So we leave it there as a strategic reserve. Okay, so with the air and sea movement phase done, we just entered the ground. So taking it from the top, I am going to move my first set of units. It is +1 to cross the Iron Curtain on the first game turn, and that represents the very modest delay imposed by the 20,000 West German border guards. And that translates to I'm a speed bump. They're doing the best they can. This NATO ZOCs do not extend across the border. The Warsaw Pact player's first player turn. So I don't have to worry about that, but I'm going to move this guy in here. He pays 1 for the clear terrain hex, 1 to cross the border and overrun those border guards, and 1 to enter an enemy ZOC. So it costs me 3 to go to there. It would cost me 4, 5, 6 to move 1 more hex, 1 to enter the hex, 1 to exit the 17th Brigade's ZOC, and 1 to enter the 17th Brigade COC. So I don't have enough movement points to do that because I only have 5 movement allowance of 5. So that doesn't happen. However, the tanks have that ability. So they spend 1, 2, 3 to move in here, and then they can go 4, 5, 6. So these 2 units will pour through that, and this is an example of how poor COCs are. Meanwhile, I'll move the East Germans up to fill that space. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cross this river. We go 1 to enter the forest, 1 to cross the river, 1 to cross the Iron Curtain border, and 1 to enter an enemy ZOC. So that cost me 4 movement points to get there. It would cost me 7 movement points to get here, so that isn't happening. The most I can do is something that looks like this. All right, now I have to worry about setting up my attacks. So one thing that I want to do is I want to flank the 8th Panzer in Lunenburg up here. So I'm going to move at least 1 of these divisions. It goes 1, 2, 3. Again, 1 to enter the hex, 1 to cross the Iron Curtain border, 1 to enter ZOC, and then 4, 5, 6 here. The movement cost of all terrain is essentially 1 hex, except for mountain hexes, and a +1 to cross major rivers. The road network in West Germany, in fact, all of Western Europe, was just so dense, there's no point to being cute about it. So pretty much it's 1 movement point where I enter the terrain itself, and +1 to enter a COC, +1 to exit. Very simple system. All right, so the second tank division, 1, 2, 3, now it can go 4, 5, 1 to exit, 1 to enter the forest, and as much as 6. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to reel this back, and I'm going to spend my last 3 movement points encircling the 9th Panzer. Here we go. 1, I don't have to worry about the COC. It doesn't extend across the border, but 2, 3, 4 to there. And that's as far as I can go. We'll move my artillery unit. Getting off the artillery units actually along the border. And we will here. We will swing out into the rain. Take brown sugar. Swing south. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. This unit started back here is actually going to be okay. If the combat system has tank units attacking into mountain and city hexes, so instead of moving my mech infantry forward, I'm actually going to swing it down here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and help take Braunschweig, which leaves this guy go 1, 2, 3, 4 to here. Give me what I need. Okay. So that's my movement there. Now, these blue stripe units are the Northeast German front. They cannot cooperate with the Southeast German front, which is my green stripe unit. So that means that the attack on Braunschweig is going to have to be carried by the Northeast German front. However, I can at least participate by providing some surrounds with my ZOCs. So I'm going to deliberately move this guy here, here, here. This is 1 to this hex, 2, 3, 4, and I can't move another hex. So that's the most I'm going to get. Here I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. The extra is for crossing the border. 3, 4. That works. Here go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There. Now this tank division is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I want to punish the US. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 2, force. Swing down there. The question is, where do I put my artillery division? I do not want my artillery division out in the open because it is a prime target for NATO. It is essentially a free air point. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's made rough terrain, so I'm okay with that. Grundgeschütz. Grundgeschütz cannot leave East Germany, but they can at least form a reserve force here guarding the Thurumber Vault, and they are doubled terrain, which makes them reasonably formidable. And so I'm essentially screening the whole Thurumber Vault with those units. The Czech units cannot move, only the Soviets can. And the Soviets are going to try and infiltrate over the Don. So continuing our adventures here, the Soviets will take their 2 divisions and they're just tiptoeing over the Czech border. And I will leave my front headquarters back where it is safe. All right, so that's it. That's my ground movement for the first turn. So now we go to the Warsaw Pact helicopter movement segment. If I chose to, and I have 2 helicopter transport points, I have only 1 helicopter unit that didn't transport in here, and that is the 35th Guards in Hex 3514, and I'm going to choose to reserve that for use later because there's a 1/6 chance that I get shot down every time I go over into enemy territory. So as an example, I'm not actually going to do this, but I will show you. So let's just presume that I wanted to go to 3519 here. And that, if I did, that would give me a complete ZOC surround on this entire pocket. So I would take a helicopter transport and I can move 10 hexes and I would go thwack, thwack, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to get shot at. It's a 1. And on a 1, I get shot down. So I didn't make it very far. I would have had to have survived 3 rolls without rolling a 1 to have actually gotten here. And then my helicopter transport unit itself would actually, a more intelligent approach to this would have been to start here and to have gone thwack, thwack, thwack out here. I can go through friendly units without being shot at. It's when I have to go into a naked ZOC that I get shot at. So I would have gone here and then here, but I was shot down here. Had I survived both of those rolls without rolling a 1, I would have made it here, and that would have meant that every single one of these units, if attacked, would have been flanked, meaning it's completely surrounded by enemy ZOCs, but also still adjacent to another friendly unit. However, as I said, I didn't think that was a good idea, so I haven't done it. All right, so we hit the end of turn and we get rid of all these little arrows. So now we enter the part where it begins to get interesting. So the next thing here is that I've got to plan my battles. What am I attacking? NATO does not have to do this, but the Soviets have to do this. So this is part of my pre-planning. So I am absolutely going to hit these guys here, and I am going to attack these guys here. And I am not going to attack the British. All right, and we'll attack here, and we'll attack here, and we'll attack here. All right, so we're going to attack here, and here, and here. I'll hit the US down here. And then the question is, do I wish? No, that's too strong. I would need to throw a lot of air to have any chance of getting that to work, so I'm not going to do it. On the other hand, it is first turn. I have surprise. I have offensive support. All right, gentlemen, no guts, no glory. We're going to take on the West Germans. Okay, so then I also need to declare that I'm going to take on Copenhagen, although that is probably going to be a disaster unless I'm really lucky. So there we go. My attacks have been planned. So we now enter the strike phase. I have to pre-mark my airstrikes. So we have tactical air and we have operational air. All right. So I have 6 tactical air, 2 operational air. What am I going to do with them? Well, I know one thing. I'm absolutely going to put a tactical airstrike on the West Germans since I'm taking a big risk going over that river. And now, the second thing that is in my mind is that I would like to disrupt units that I'm attacking that have their defense rounded up. But equally important, I want to hit NATO's reserves. So I've got a battle here. The 11th Armored Cavalry Unit cannot react into that battle because it is the only unit in an enemy ZOC. So it's got to stay there and hold the front line. Ditto for the 2nd of the 3rd Armored. But the 3rd Brigade of the 8th Infantry can absolutely react into that battle. I don't want it to react into that battle, so guess what? We're going to plaster it. All right, now I've got to worry about the same thing here. So I'm going to plaster the 20th Brigade of the 7th Panzer. And again, the 19th can't react because I've got it pinned with the ZOC, but the 14th can, so we'll plaster that as well. All right, so that's 4 of my tactical air already allocated. Now, I'm not worried about the Brits reacting because the Brits aren't the same nationality, and you can only react into a hex of your own nationality. So we're good there. Well, we're going to take a risk. We're going to try and hit this guy here. Okay, so that's good. Now, those are my absolute must-haves, and I still have 1 tactical air point. So now the question is there anybody in open terrain that I can hit? And the NATO player has been incredibly careful. There is nobody in open terrain that I can hit except headquarters, and I can't hit headquarters with tactical air. So now the question is, can I hit a target of opportunity? There is somebody in the open. I'm going to drop on the Brits there. Okay, cool. Now, to take advantage of my operational error, I'm going to go hit NATO's reforgers. Let's see, let's go hit that guy. And let's go hit that guy. Okay, so there's our allocation of air. We now are going to go to the offensive strike segment. I am not going to execute any nuclear strikes. That would be a little premature. I'm not going to execute any chemical strikes. I am going to go straight to airstrikes, and I could create some air interdiction, but NATO got such good movement that there's very little left in the rear to go interdict. So we're just going to go for damage. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit Kaiserslautern, and I'm going to try and hit one of these reforger units. Normally, an airstrike affects 2 steps in the hex of your choice. They must be the same 2 steps if you're hitting a division that's 1 unit. Strikes against reforger units affect the individual warehouse. Now, because it's surprise, I get to add 1 to my die roll. However, because I'm in enemy airspace, I have to subtract 1 from my die roll. So this is a straight up attack. No terrain effects apply because warehouses can't hide in terrain. So with that, we go to the strike table, and I am hoping to roll a 5 or 6 and kill this sucker. And I do. I roll that. So I am going to kill the 4th Armored. Yep. So he dies. So we send him to the destroyed pile, and we're done with that. Okay. I'm now moving north to the 2nd operational airstrike outside of Duisburg, where I'm hitting the 2nd of the 2nd Armored, and I roll again. That disrupts the target, which for a reforger unit means that it is permanently damaged. And if I can get 1 more disruption result against it, it will die. Okay, so we place a disrupted marker there. All right, and we're done. Now we go to my tactical airstrikes, starting in the north, just outside of Lüneburg. We'll hit the British. Now the British do get the benefit of terrain. So, but I also have a +1 for my surprise. So essentially, I want a 5 or 6 to kill. I roll a 1, and so that is the only thing that misses. So the Brits survive. All right, no joy there. All right, so now we come down a little bit south. We'll hit the West German 14th Panzer in 3418. We roll again, dead. All right, the neighbor just to the south, roll again, just disrupted it. We're going to hit the Brit just north of Braunschweig. Now there's no terrain here, and I'm adding 1 to my die roll, so a 4, 5, or 6 will wipe that unit. I get a 6. The British disappear in a hail of napalm. And now, this is one of the interesting points of the game. I've just eliminated a target I was going to attack. So that enables me to put a breakthrough zone there, and that will have implications momentarily. Okay, so moving further south, we're going to hit the US. We are hoping to stop that reserve unit. This was supposed to be on the 8th, 3rd of the 8th. We do not kill it, but we do manage to disrupt it, and that was the main point, to keep it out of that battle. Okay, and then finally, and really importantly, we are hoping to clobber the West Germans. So we roll here. I get a 6. I'm extremely happy. I have my choice. I will wipe the Panzer Brigade, and that leaves the remaining Panzer Grenadier Brigade disrupted, because it's one of the 2 units in the 2 steps in the hex that are affected by that airstrike. Okay, that's the end of the airstrike phase. So now we're going to do our artillery strikes. We're going to hit the 9th of the 3rd Panzer, and I need a 5 or 6. I barely disrupt him.
Okay, and then we go hunting for my next. All right, so here I'm going to attempt to disrupt the 5th of the 2nd Panzer Grenadier. I roll a 6, I am rolling incredibly well here. NATO is hurting badly. Get another breakthrough. Okay, and then for my final trick, the Czech front's artillery is still in southern Czechoslovakia, so we don't worry about that. So we're done with the strike phase. We now go to the combat segment, and we are going to run this battle by battle. I'm going to start at Copenhagen in the north. So Copenhagen is a major city, and that means that it has a defense strength of 2, which is printed on the hex. So I'm going to attack it. I have got an attack strength of 7. I have 2 column shifts because I have it surrounded, and therefore this constitutes a concentric attack. It is surrounded by enemy ZOCs, no friendly unit is next to it. However, it is also a major city, which gives 2 column shifts in the defender's favor, so those cancel. All I am left with is 1 extra column shift for the fact that this is surprise. So my 7 attack strength to the 2 defense strength is a 3-to-1, up to a 4-to-1. I roll the die. I am screwed. So that didn't work so well. So we go up to the CRT, and we see that at 4-to-1, with a die roll of 2, the attacker loses 1, the defender must retreat. So that didn't work because the defenders in a major city can ignore retreats. So no joy there, the defenders hold out, and I get to kill 1 of these guys. And just because it is easier for these units to escape, I'm going to kill 1 of the regiments, airborne regiments, and send it to the destroyed. So the Copenhagen Gambit was a disaster. Not so good. All right, moving further south, we are going to hit the 17th of the 6th Panzer Grenadier. It is a lovely 3. I'm going to hit it with essentially 24, 26. Okay, so that is a 8-to-1 attack. Up to 9-to-1 because of surprise. So I really can't miss this. And I don't, and that's the end of that unit. All right, so I now have a breakthrough zone here. That doesn't particularly matter because I don't have any reserves to move through. Just for the sake of argument, if I had left this guy here as a reserve, let's go get an OMG marker on that. Okay, so during the reserve phase, this unit would have been able to move 1. It ignores ZOCs in a hex in or adjacent to a breakthrough zone, but it moves with half of its movement allowance, which is printed 6, so it's got 3. This could go 1, 2, 3, and exploit to there as a reserve. But I didn't actually do that. There's not much reason to have a breakthrough, but because this is a clear hex, and this is a clear hex, I have the ability to advance. So I'm going to do that. So this unit is going to advance here and then exploit into that hex. And this unit is going to exploit into that hex. Okay, that technically the exploitation is the 2nd hex, so I advanced the mech infantry into that hex and the armored division exploited, getting a 2nd hex of advance. All right, we move to the next battle. Now, setting this up is important. I'm going to take a heck of a chance here, but I'm going to go after the British in an attempt to get a concentric attack against the German brigade in Lüneburg. I am going to commit my helicopter to this attack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is subject to a flak. I'm hoping that the Brits don't roll a 1. They don't. I make it. So now I am going to commit my offensive support. For game turn 1 only, the limit of 2 column shifts in either direction does not apply. So I'm going to attack here with 1 column shift for surprise, 1 column shift for the helicopter, 1 column shift for offensive support from the Northeast Guards headquarters. We don't have the offensive support markers in this playtest version of the game, so I don't have a marker to put, but that's 3 column shifts total. My 8 to the Brits 3 is a 2-to-1, which goes up to a 5-to-1. I roll the die, I get a 6. So 6 at 5-to-1. We look at our combat odds, and 6 at 5-to-1 is a lovely D1 R2. The D1 takes care of the unit, so it's sent to the destroyed unit. This goes back here, and we get to advance in. Now, even though I'm a mechanized unit, a hard unit, I can't advance a second hex because the first hex wasn't a clear terrain hex. However, I now have the Germans in Lüneburg surrounded. So now we attack the Germans. Now, if we look at this hex, we've got Lüneburg itself, which has a defense strength of 1 organically for being a minor city. And then the 8th of the 3rd Panzer adds another 3, so that my defense strength is a 4. And I am being attacked by 3. This is not the same front, the 138th. It cannot participate. So I've just got a 3 for the 6th Guards, and then these 2 mech infantry. So that is 16, 19. So 19 to 4 is just a 3-to-1. However, I also have a 4-to-1 for surprise and another 2 column shifts for a concentric attack where the enemy is surrounded by ZOCs and is not adjacent to another friendly unit. So that takes me up to a 6-to-1. But the unit's in a minor city, which takes precedence over the forest there. So that's down to a 5-to-1 attack. So we roll the die, another 6, another D1 result. Things are going very well. And that enables this unit to advance in. All right. Moving right along. Now, again, I want to think through here how I do this. Because I have a breakthrough here, I can allocate any of the units that were adjacent to this breakthrough zone to advance after combat, even though their target was destroyed. What I'm going to do is, because I have no reserve to exploit it, I'm going to delete that, but I will take advantage of that rule that allows me to advance after combat. So these 2 regiments have advanced into the hex that my air wiped out. They will not get to participate in any further attack, but they are 1 hex farther forward. I could have exploited into a second hex if this was not marsh, but it is a marsh hex, so I can only get 2 hexes of advance, which is a 30-mile advance on the scale of this game, if both hexes are clear. Now I'm going to hit this hapless fellow, and I'm hitting him with 40 points, so I'm not even going to bother rolling. That's a 10-to-1 many time over, and he's disrupted. So end of that guy, and we'll advance these guys in. Braunschweig is going to be a slightly tougher customer. I have got a 4 for defense, 3 for the unit itself, and another 1 for Braunschweig. So I'm a 4, and I am attacking with 16, 22. So it's a 5-to-1 attack, up to a 7-to-1 attack for concentric, up to an 8-to-1 attack for surprise, down to 7-to-1 for the terrain itself. A minor city is a -1 column shift. So 7-to-1, roll the die, 3, it's a D1 result, and the Germans are destroyed. That allows me to advance in. Now, this does mean that I control these cities now. We will put there, and we will advance in. And I need a city control marker up here as well. Moving right along, I want to stop right now and just say, let's see, are there any questions that need to get answered?
Hey, Bruce, this is Fred. Just wanted to point out when you did the helicopter shoot down,
Yes,
not only do you got to roll a 1, you also got to roll against the
defense strength.
defense strength.
That
Okay.
is correct. That is correct, Fred. So
Just wanted to,
remember that I wasn't really doing that in the sense that I said that that wasn't a move I was going to make. I was showing what could have happened, but Fred is absolutely correct that that 1 would then have required me to roll again if I had rolled higher than that unit's defense strength. And again, this is a playtest version of Vassal. The actual helicopter transport unit would have had a defense of 2. So after rolling that 1, if I had then rolled anything higher than a 2, that unit would have been shot down. So it's not quite as bad as a 1/6 chance of dying every time you enter an enemy's UC or an enemy unit. Thank you, Fred. Any other questions?
Yeah, Dave here. Just, maybe I missed it, but when you did the attack with the single West German and you flew the helicopter, and you didn't designate that as a battle ahead of time, were you supposed to, or did I miss it?
No, I was supposed to. That was a last-minute decision, and you're absolutely correct. I should have put a battle on that. So had I been playing a rules lawyer, he would have said, hey, Bruce, you hadn't planned that one.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, now we know who the rules lawyer is in the room.
I've actually received a number of very nice emails from people saying, I am a lawyer and I am a rules lawyer. Don't shoot me. So all good. Now, again, order matters. So here, what I want to do is I want to hit this unit here so that I can get at least a flank attack on this unit here. Whereas if I were to attack this unit first, I wouldn't be getting a flank attack here. So it's worth minding this. Now, there is a part of this that is not true, because this unit can advance after combat into this breakthrough zone. So I can declare that as a combat and move these guys in because I want to protect my artillery unit. I'm not going to move the 2nd Division in, but this does mean now that I have a flank attack against this guy out here in the open. Now, the East German unit here can't participate. It's advancing, but I'm going to hit this unit here. So I'll remove the battle marker with the 3 units that are adjacent in the south. And so I've got 28 to 3. So it's a 9-to-1 combat. The shift for surprise counters the shift for the rough terrain. It's just 9-to-1. I really can't miss. And so he's destroyed. And we advance in. And then up here, I'm going to attack with a grand total of 24. So an 8-to-1, same deal. The rough is countered by the surprise. I roll a 2 at 8-to-1. And that's still enough to kill me. So as you see, because NATO dispersed to avoid being plastered by the air, it's taking it on the chin during these ground attacks. Can't advance any further than the first hex because this is rough. Okay, so we're done there. And then we have the final battle against the US. Now here, one thing I forgot to do is I should have moved my Southeast German front headquarters. So we'll move up to here. Okay, so now I'm going to hit the US. Now, this unit could have reacted in if I hadn't disrupted it, but I did disrupt it, so it's not going to react, and nowhere else has anybody else had the power to react in. So this combat is a 3 versus 8-8. Okay, so it's 16, 26, 29 to 3, so a 9-to-1. Rough again canceled by the attack. I could throw on my offensive support just for giggles and make it a 10-to-1, and so there's no way I can. All right, so we clean up here and we advance in. Okay, now the one place where I might have problems down here. So the Soviet player analyzes this and says, I've got 18, but I'm halved coming over the river, so I'm a 9. The defender is just a 2, but I have to assume that the mountain unit is going to react in. It will be doubled in the forests, so that means that the defense will be a 4, and I'm attacking with a 9. That's a raw 2-to-1. The forest and my surprise attack counter each other, so it's just a 2-to-1. But I really want to get over that river, so I'm going to allocate offensive support and my helicopter and hope to make that a 4-to-1. Offensive support is a gimme, the helicopter is not, so I advance in and I roll, but we make it. So now I have a 4-to-1 attack with this unit having reacted in. And we roll the die, and this is the only one that might, not have a good outcome. All right, so that's an A1, R1. So the Germans have a decision to make. Do we hold that hex or do we retreat? We're going to make the decision to eliminate a step in order to hold that hex. So I will send my poor mountain unit to Valhalla, and because that's voluntary, I pick who dies. The helicopter goes back, and the Soviets lose a step, and because I want to kill the best step they have, we will take that step out of the 15th Guards tank. So we basically trade on the river line, and I am left in possession of the terrain, which is very much what I want. Okay, there we go. End of the first turn. Yes, Fred, il ne passe en passe. Precisely. I'm probably horribly mispronouncing that. French was not my language. All right, so we are now done with game turn 1 for the Soviets. Now, I could be entering the reserve phase, and I could be moving my OMGs if I had designated any, but I didn't have enough units for reserves. Everybody was up on the front line trying to kill something. Now get to NATO's turn, and I will move through this very rapidly. So the first thing that NATO is going to do, consider whether he has any air movement. This is a very bad turn to move anything by air because the Soviets have the highest interception value possible. So we won't do any air, we just move by ground. There is no possibility, because of the refugee rules, to move anything by march movement, even if I were solely in friendly airspace. So we're not going to do that, but I want to take advantage of the fact that I held that river line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because I've got to pay the extra 1 for the ZOC, but we are now holding that, and I want a reserve that can react in. So we're going to do that. Now, that action, gentlemen, is far more deadly than moving that guy up to the front line, because I now force him to strike me in the rear. If I were to move up here and the Soviets were to attack me, well, then I've got 2 brigades there. That's great. But if he hits me with air, the effect will be on both of those units. And he can get that effect of pinning both of those units, killing one, or at least disrupting both, because I put it in that hex. If I'm here, I can react into either hex, and he's going to only disrupt at most 1 unit. So having a reserve in this game really makes sense. And generals have been telling us that for centuries, so surprise, surprise. Now, the Czech front is going to get to move on game turn 2, so I have to be a little careful here. And the question is, can the Soviets get over the Donau? And they can't, because this would be 1, 2, 3, and then it would be 4, 5, 6 to move another hex, but it would actually be 7 because of the river. So I can know that there's no chance that the Soviets are getting over this river as long as I can hold these 2 hexes. So this guy will run up here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I'm going to leave the Germans to manage the Czechs. So 1, 2, now 1, 2 to exit. 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll go there, and we'll stick this here. Okay, now for the first turn, I need to take a digression through the one special rule, which sounds very innocuous, but we need to look at how combat supply works, because it works unlike any other game I've ever played. In most games, you check for combat supply right before the moment of combat. And if you're in supply, great. And if you're not, you're halved. In this game, everybody starts in combat supply. You go out of combat supply at the end of any battle cycle. And then the question is, can you replenish? And on game turn 1, no NATO unit can replenish. Why? Because they're caught by surprise and their ammo is back under lock and key in warehouses far in the rear. NATO did that because they were very worried about the terrorist threat in Germany. which was actually quite active in the 1970s, and the legacy endured into the 80s. And so they kept their munitions under lock and key in warehouses. Caught by surprise, the logistics network is empty. So right now, trucks are furiously trying to beat their way through refugees, airstrikes, and down bridges to get to those warehouses. And then they've got to fight their way back to their units through refugees, airstrikes, and down bridges. So for day one, every NATO unit has its basic load of supply, but if it fires it off in a battle, there's nobody there to replenish, which means that NATO units would run out of combat supply if they attack in Game Turn 1, and during the Soviet Game Turn 2, they will be attacking out of supply NATO units. So for Game Turn 1, the US has a strong disincentive to counterattack. And so I'm looking at the 79th Guards there, salivating over the opportunity to get a flank attack on him. But if I did it, my US units would all be horribly out of supply. So we're not going to do that. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. Get to Würzburg. That's about as far as we can get. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4. We'll just hold the line there on the 2nd Armored Cavalry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go up there. All right, block the Soviets, because you can, if I don't block the Soviets could go right past me to there. That's not good, so we got to make sure. This is a game where you really need to cover your hexes. All right, we will bring up our reserves, place them there. And as you can see, we now have some fairly nice reserves everywhere. The Canadians come up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Since I don't want to make myself subject to airstrikes, we'll split like that. And this unit will move up here to just give me a real density of units that are able to react. Okay, now what are the Belgians going to do? Fred, what are the Belgians going to do? Let's see. We're going to go up here, hold there. I think we'll just form the Belgians up like that. And again, that gives me a small reserve. Okay. I am inviting the Soviet player potentially do this, but that would be begging to be counterattacked in this clear terrain hex. So the Soviets probably aren't going to be silly enough to do that. Now I need to form out my national armies because I can only react into my own hexes. This means that the British Army of the Rhine is going to take over the defense of Hanover, and the Germans need to worry about holding down here. So there. Germans will go there and there. And I'm going to stick that last German there. I very much want to hold this river line. Hanover is the key here. So go defend Hanover. Now you will note, as NATO, I had 3 tactical air points that I could have used defensively, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use those air points to slow the Soviets down with air interdiction. And that is going to influence how I attack. I'm not subject to forward defense anymore, so we can run away as much as possible. And we will. The Dutch go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and run away to Bremen. The US goes up to hold Oldenburg. I'm going to leave the 7th of the 3rd Panzer in Hamburg and make the Soviets dig me out. But the rest of Landshut is going to run screaming to the north. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 6. All right, we're abandoning Schleswig-Holstein, but we'll get some help here. So the Danes can come down. 1, 2, the Danes will hold Flensburg. Now I have to worry about Soviet power drop still. So actually, probably I should do something like this. Up to Copenhagen. We're actually going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're all going to get next to Copenhagen. The reason I'm doing this is that one of these can hold the hex, the front line, and the other could, if the Soviets try and attack again, the other can react into Copenhagen, because cities in this game are effectively static friendly units. So I could react in to defend it. So now I've made damn sure that the Soviets don't have a chance to get Copenhagen, and it is a source of supply for me. All right, so moving right along, the Brits come up here, go to Munster, and we will move in here, and we will move in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now the Dutch and the Belgians can come. So I'm going to do march movement with the Dutch, and this unit in the south is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and take shelter in this forest hex. I have not left the Netherlands, so I'm not subject to the refugee rule. The Dutch aren't panicking yet, but that allowed me to double my movement using march movement. The rest of the Dutch are going to enter West Germany, which means I'm subject to the refugee rules, so I have to use my printed movement allowance. So 5, 5, 5, 5, and 4. So in comes the Dutch army, the Belgians likewise. All right, so the Belgians are on the move. The French still haven't activated, so no joy there. I'm going to leave my 26 Luftland guarding my reforger units just in case the Soviets try a little chop there. That wouldn't be good. Go up to there. All right, so I have moved NATO. All is good. Now we enter my air phase. I'm going to use my air slightly differently. We're going to prevent the Soviets from streaming forward through this gap, which means I'm going to drop an air point here, and I am going to drop an air point here. Now I have one problem. Interdiction adds +1 to the cost to enter hex. So this Soviet unit here can go 1, 2. He can go 3, 4, and he could go 5, 6. And I really don't want him to do that. So given that I have left the Weser open because I don't want to be subject to Soviet air next turn, I've dropped 2 of my air here, but I'm going to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we're all good except here. So that one unit, my third air point, is going to plaster. So I'm going to hit him. I roll a die. He's in the open. I roll a 1. I'm in trouble. That is the only roll that would miss. So I whiff on that guy, which means I have left myself vulnerable to a Soviet penetration of the Weser. Oh joy. So that's the end of the NATO turn. And we are at 9:30 here. So I think that, Mo, I'm going to suggest that we stop here. I won't try and do the next Soviet turn. But
Okay.
that was a pretty good run through of the first turn of the strategic surprise scenario. If we now look at the destroyed units, and we see what do we have here. So Copenhagen was a disaster with the loss of an entire Warsaw Pact division. And NATO has lost a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 brigades. So almost 5 divisions.
Wow.
Were smashed up in this. Now, the way combat in the real world works, a unit is shattered and pulled out of the line long before it's 100% destroyed. So many of these units would ultimately be rebuilt in the coming weeks. If there were coming weeks to rebuild, this game is very often over in the first week. But those 14 brigades are now combat ineffective. The Soviets have taken very little loss, but of course this was their surprise turn where everything went their way. Now NATO will firm up. It won't be subject to those surprise column shifts and surprise airstrike shifts. The Soviets have gotten, let's see, if we look at their furthest, they have gotten 45 miles into West Germany. And in most places, they're somewhere between 15 and 30 miles into West Germany. So that's what they've done on the first day. Their struggle gets a lot tougher now that NATO is fully formed and doesn't have to worry quite so much about Soviet air because their own air is coming up. But this is still an incredible slugfest for the next 6 turns. And there it is. So I'll stop there.